event with 4 innovative designers, all under 30, and they're here to talk about their paths to their successful careers in their field of design. The talk today is being broadcast live on Channel 29 in Westport and streamed live in many different ways, and people will pick it up and see it. So I just wanted to let you know that, so that when you do ask questions, the people in the greater world will be hearing them. Afterwards, we have some light refreshment. Well, please don't let that make you shy or anything like that. We have some light refreshments so that you can network and have the opportunity to talk with each other and speak with our presenters today. Nicholas Fjellberg came to Westport Library 6 months at least ago with an idea for this program. And then we planned it, we picked a date, and it snowed and snowed, and the wind blew, and it couldn't happen. And it took us a while to be able to get everybody back together. And so today we are here on this bright sunny day. Nicholas is a Norwegian-American industrial designer practicing in the greater New York City area. He received a BFA in industrial design from the Savannah College of Art and Design with his concentration in service design and sustainability. In 2010, between his sophomore and junior years at SCAD, he served in the Royal Norwegian Army as an Arctic border ranger. And last year, he won the International Design Sense competition with his entry to Sense Space, one extreme to the other. He is currently employed as an industrial designer for Coach in New York City. And I have to tell you, when I first met Nicholas, even 6 months ago, while we knew what 3D printers were, they weren't everywhere. Even I heard somebody talking about 3D printers on Hawaii 5.0 the other night. And I asked Nicholas if he designed on a 3D printer, and he looked at me and said, "Of course." So we went from what to of course. A great transition in a short time. Nicholas has arranged to have all of the panelists here today, which I'm sure was no easy feat. So I'm going to turn this podium over to him to let him introduce them to you. Ladies and gentlemen, with great pleasure, Nicholas Fjellberg.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you, Bill, Maxine Lewis, as well as the rest of the Westport Library. I would like to thank our panelists today. They're awesome, taking time out of their schedule to put together this amazing presentation. They're all so talented, and I like to call them my friends as well as inspirations. So our first speaker today will be Ben Bangzer, who is an industrial designer, toy developer, sculptor, and Westport native. He received his Bachelor of Industrial Design from the Syracuse University. Currently, he's an industrial designer at Product Ventures, a brand strategy and design consultancy in Fairfield. Where he designs products, packaging for a broad spectrum of household brands. Please welcome Ben Bangzer.
Thank you, Nicholas. So I'm Ben Bangzer. I'm an industrial designer here in Fairfield, Connecticut. And I'm just going to take you through a little brief outline of what I'm going to talk to you about today so you know what you've gotten yourselves into. First, I'm going to talk about industrial design, what it is, and young me, what led me there. Then I'll talk about my time at design school in the Syracuse University Industrial Design Department. I'll follow up with talking about my current job at Product Ventures at Fairfield, Connecticut. And I'll speak a little bit about my future plans. So I want to start off by asking you guys, what is industrial design? Some of you may know, some of you may not. It is not this. It's not the design of industrial buildings or factories or equipment. Industrial design is the professional service of creating and developing concepts and specifications that optimize the function, value, and appearance of products and systems for the mutual benefit of both user and manufacturer. So this is what industrial designers do. We design products, packaging, footwear, cars, cutlery, furniture, consumer electronics, that kind of stuff. So for a minute, I'm going to rewind and tell you how one industrial designer came to be. Started off with my parents. My father is an entrepreneur who studied physics. My mother studied excuse me. My mother studied architecture and currently has her own needlepoint business, custom needlepoint design business here in Westport. At a young age, I was fascinated with tools. You see me with my first fake toy tools, plastic pliers, and how excited I was to get my first real tools and to start making things and taking things apart. And in my childhood, I was a big fan of electronic roadkill, which was neighbors, family, friends would find fax machines and broken phones, and they would bring it over to our house, and I would tear it apart. And it was my first look inside of these products that we all took for granted, and I think it was a big part of bringing me towards industrial design. I was also big into the Pinewood Derby. I won that a few years in a row, and I also was big in Legos and mechs, and so I love to make things. I wasn't big on action figures like G.I. Joes. I like to use the toys that allow me to build. Middle school, I could sum up in one doodle, which I just found in an old sketchbook. Here it is. I really was not a big fan of middle school because there was a lot of sitting around and listening, and there wasn't any doing. So I started making my own things. I got together with friends, and we would take apart both of our bikes and fuse them into one Franken bike, which the idea here was that you go down a hill at a more level pitch. And in fact, I think we both have a scar currently that can show that it does not indeed work. And that's why our bikes look the way they do. So it's a good lesson. When I was 15, my mom lied to Silvermine Art Guild in New Canaan and told them I was 18, and that allowed me to take a sculpting class. So I got to use some heavy machinery, weld and cut metal, and that helped me get into becoming the sculptor I am and the designer that I am. I was also a pole vaulter, and I just really like to work into any conversation that I can. So the college decision, I got into most of the schools that I wanted to get into, but it wasn't focused on design, my college search. And so it was actually during the college search that I found out about industrial design and what it was. And so I went to Syracuse. It was between Syracuse and UVM, and I loved UVM. I loved the town. I loved everything about it. But I went and I visited Syracuse, and I said, okay, I'm in the studio. There's a kid asleep in a bathtub that's not hooked up to anything in the center of the studio because he just pulled an all-nighter. It was a really cool environment, and I want to be here. So I went to Syracuse, and here's our design building. It's called the Warehouse. It has industrial design, graphic design, fashion design, and interior design all rolled into one building, which is downtown in Syracuse. My curriculum had everything from, it was a 5-year program. The curriculum was drawing, human factors, design research, production processes, so learning how these things are made that we're designing. And I also took a lot of credits for sculpture. It's also where I met my girlfriend Taylor, who's another designer who's here today. She's in the footwear industry. She designs shoes in Boston, and I'm sure she'd love to talk to any of you about her experiences in industrial design, which are very different from mine. We learned how to manage our time in school. We made a habit of taking pictures of each other sleeping during class. Maybe 1 or 2 of these aren't in class, the rest are. Our class spaces looked like this. We had beanbag chairs, it was casual, we relaxed and had conversations and presented to each other. And then we also had a desk, which was always a total mess, covered in cupcakes and parts from Home Depot and Lowe's and garden gnomes, and that's where we did our personal projects. After my first year at school, I did an apprenticeship with 3 separate sculptors during the summer, one of whom does these contemporary wooden bas-relief carvings, another who does metal sculptures, and a third who does stone sculptures. And this was just another way to learn some more, learn a bit of their trades. I got back to school and we had a lot of sketching classes. One of those classes was in digital rendering, so we used something called a Wacom Cintiq, and you can see it there. It's like a big iPad that you can draw directly on and render and rapidly visualize things. And so unlike pen and paper and marker, you can build layers and you can also hit undo, which is very helpful. So here's an example of a digital rendering that I did for a concept of a knife, a camping knife. You can see nothing that I do starts off looking like that. It all starts off with a little doodle, like in the upper right-hand corner. I keep a pen and paper next to my tablet so I can think through things quickly, because nothing beats good old pen and paper. But eventually you need a higher fidelity rendering, which looks like the one below. It's another example of digital rendering. These are some Wi-Fi routers that were done. You can get effects that you wouldn't be able to get with pen and paper digitally rendered. We also learned CAD rendering. So we would actually build a 3D model on the computer using a program called SolidWorks, and then render it using a program called KeyShot, which allows you to add materials and lighting and really create a photorealistic image of what your product would be. And prototyping. So this is where the 3D printing comes into play. I have some samples for you all to play with down there. But it's called an SLA machine. It's a clear 3D printer. You can print crystal clear. And so you sand it down in the lower left-hand corner, you can see that, and then it gets painted or cast. And eventually you pull an all-nighter. There's 2 a.m. the night before the presentation, 9 a.m. the next day. The room is thick with the scent of fresh paint from all the projects, and here's what the final prototype looks like. And prototyping is just so important because you get to actually experience the physical device itself. We also learned how to create interfaces. So this was an application that goes along with the product that I just showed you here. And so it's controlled by your iPhone. We wireframe out digital interfaces on how you interact with the devices themselves. Had to throw in a 3D printing slide for you guys. Here are some of the processes and some of the materials that are used in 3D printing, everything from metal to ceramic, clear plastics, rubbers. There are a lot of processes, and it gives you a lot of opportunities for prototyping. At Syracuse, I went abroad to London for a semester. It was really cool to, this was not a typical breakfast. This was the morning of the royal wedding. And we were able to get away from Syracuse for a winter, which was really nice, and also learned from teachers from around the world, Italy and Denmark and England, so it was a really great experience. Best out of ID class I took there, cooking. It was a local chef, and I figure it's probably the most useful class I'll ever take, because if you can roast yourself a nice red snapper, there's not much else in life. So I graduated. Here's some of my graduating class in ID. There were 27 of us total. And I started my job search out on Long Island Sound. And I had very, very little luck out on water. So I came back to land, and I found a short freelance gig designing locks. Actually, the bezel surrounding a digital lock for high-end lockers. I also worked with a local inventor named Ben Gorbati, who has brought toys to this world such as battle trolls, wrestling buddies, glow-in-the-dark Band-Aids. And we pitched this concept to Hasbro. It's called Bath Bobbers, originally named Water Wobblers. And it was actually the first product that I worked on that went to market. So it's this bathtub toy. I have them over there. They're really kind of silly, but I throw them in the bath when I take them. Then I finally got hired full-time at Product Ventures after an internship. I interned there a few times during college. And it's a creative consultancy in Fairfield. It was started by a man named Peter Clark, who's a really incredible designer, and established this vibrant workspace that we all work in. We have designers, researchers, engineers, industrial and graphic design, and so it's a really great collaborative work environment. We design products like this, everything from pencil sharpeners to absinthe bottles, Auric vacuums, and Dr. Scholl's shoe inserts. We have a consumer research lab where we actually bring in a moderator and actual consumers, users, to experience the prototypes that we've created and give us their feedback. And something that's pretty interesting about that is that you're taking these prototypes that can cost thousands of dollars. I remember in one instance there was a lotion bottle that was 3D printed, and it looks so real because it has a label on it, it has lotion in it, it has a real working pump, and you give it to a consumer and they say, yeah, I like this, and they put it down, and the $7,000 model explodes and lotion goes everywhere, and we're scrambling to fix it. So it's kind of a hectic experience putting your designs in the hands of people who have not experienced them before, and so it's really telling as far as what works and what doesn't, and we're on the fly making iterations to the designs that as they make a comment, we'll go back, we'll go into the model shop, and we'll pop back in and say, is this what you're talking about? And they'll be like, yeah, it's pretty good, and we'll work from there. So it's on-the-fly design. And there's my desk, and my day is pretty much broken down into 5 things. We have meetings as a team. Of course, we do research. Even though I'm an industrial designer, not a researcher, I go and I need to get myself acquainted with the projects that I'm working on. We have brainstorming sessions. I do a lot of sketching, probably 4 to 6 hours on most days, conceptualizing, and then we also create mock-ups. So here's an example of a project that I did not work on. This was not done by Product Ventures, but it's my take on how, just to give you an example of how a typical project goes. The client comes to us and they give us a brief which says something like, present us 5 concepts for a new 1-liter vodka bottle for Kettle One and its flavor extensions. And it needs to show our heritage, and maybe they'll give us a few other constraints. And they'll also give us some technical constraints, which you can see there. It doesn't mean anything to most of you, but of course they have existing bottle lines and they need to adhere to those because it can be expensive to rebuild a factory. So we go out and we acquaint ourselves with vodka. We buy a lot of the product. We'll go to the liquor store and get every vodka bottle there. We'll get a lot of other types of bottles that we find relevant. And then we'll distill, pun intended, the brand and the product into a few keywords from which we'll get our design direction. We start designing, the industrial designers and the graphic designers go off and we start creating hundreds of sketches and we pin those up, and it's a long process. We're pairing things together, what works with what, and we're tweaking. And finally we give that to the engineer who, using a program called SolidWorks, creates a 3D model of the best concepts. And those can go on to be prototyped, 3D printed, or cut out of foam. And that's so important because then you get to experience it in your hand and see how it pours and see how it looks in 3D. And so we give that to consumers, they test it. We repeat that process a bunch of times because it never works out the first time. And then eventually we complete the project, and that can take anywhere from a few months to a few years. Where are my classmates currently? I'm at Product Ventures. There are people designing packaging, furniture, sports equipment, kids' toys, consumer electronics, and that's just to show you the broad range of career paths that industrial design can lead to. My plan for the future is to make more stuff. I'm happier when I'm making things. I'm happy at Product Ventures, of course. I'm a new hire, so I don't have any plans for after Product Ventures, but for now, the more I make, the happier I am. And here's one quick example of it. It's called the B1 aluminum bowl. It's a water jet cut aluminum bowl. So the process goes a little something like this. I get on my computer and I design a flat pattern, otherwise known as a die line. That gets sent to a water jet cutting machine, which uses 90,000 psi water mixed with sand to blast through the metal and cut out the specific pattern that I've defined. The product comes looking like that, a flat pack shippable bowl, which then as you press expands into a fruit bowl. And that's there for you to play around with afterwards. So thanks a lot for coming out. Here's my contact information. It's really small down there. I can let you know those are my favorite design blogs, so you can learn more about industrial design because I'm just one of many different types of designer. And up next, we have Chandler Noah. I don't have his little card here, but he'll introduce himself.
My name is Chandler Noah, and I'm an interior architect. I went to school for architecture at the Savannah College of Art and Design with Nicholas and Annabelle. And I'm currently employed at an interiors firm in New York City. So today I'm just going to kind of walk you through a little bit of my background, and then I'm going to walk you through my thesis project and the 2 short projects. I have a lot of information here, so I'm going to try and go through it as fast as I can, making sense. Early influences. I grew up in an extremely small town in northern Alabama of just 50,000 people. It wasn't very progressive. It was a dry county. There's no alcohol served or sold anywhere, so we would have to go far away to get alcohol. So I was always outdoors. I grew up on a large plot of land, so I was always in an amazing landscape, and that was super inspiring. Well, now my work, that's super inspiring to me, and it pushes me creatively. I was forced by my father to play sports, and so I was playing basketball, baseball, and tennis, but I found other loves later on. So I started painting, sculpting, drawing, and I was musically talented. I played the violin, the drums, the piano, and I was in a traveling children's choir. my mom was sort of the force behind me being really creative. She really pushed me to go out and put myself out there as an artist. So I started to enter competitions in northern Alabama, and I won them. I traveled a lot when I was younger. My family would go to Aspen, Colorado a lot. My grandparents have been going there since the 50s. So that was awesome for me. It was a big influence on me because I would go to ski school and I would meet these awesome kids from Switzerland and from South America and wherever. But so I made a lot of great friends through that experience, and I still keep in contact with them. I traveled to France in 1999, and that was my first experience being in Europe, and I was there I think for 2 weeks. So we traveled from Paris to the south of France. So I was sort of overtaken by the culture, and that was my first time being exposed to European architecture. To me, that was amazing. We went to Monte Carlo, which was unbelievable, and that was the first time I had an experience of a nude beach. And then 2001, my family, I traveled with my mother, my aunt, and my grandmother to Italy. This was in 2001, and we went from Milan down to Venice, and we went to the glass blowing factories in Verona, which was unbelievable. Another one of my earlier influences, I was a model at the age of 15 here in New York City. I was in Atlanta, Georgia with my parents, and I was scouted by this woman from, I don't remember where she was from, but she asked me if I wanted to come to New York and model, and so I thought it would be an amazing experience because I was in Alabama and I wanted to see something different, and I was super determined to be independent because I was 15. So I came to New York, I think the summer of being 15. It was like 2 days after being on homecoming court, so it's like the juxtaposition of being in Alabama on a football field and then coming to New York and working at a huge agency. So I loved my life in the city, and I made amazing friends who I've kept in contact with. It was kind of tough traveling between the two because I felt a sense of freedom, obviously, in New York City, and I could be anything I wanted to be myself here, and then I would go back to Alabama, and it's, you know, very rigid. When I was here, I met Peter Hinkett, who's now a famous photographer, and I became great friends with him. He was sort of underdeveloped at the time, but now he does great work. And this is the shot. This is one of Peter's shots. So one thing that I loved about being around Peter is he was so passionate, and I would go with him on set. I met him he was shooting me for a test shoot when I was 16 years old, and after meeting him, we became great friends, and I would go with him on sets, and he would be so passionate about what he was doing, and the night before he'd be talking about it and so excited, and I felt that same passion with what I was doing. So he's been somewhat of like a brother to me. He's from the Netherlands, and so he's living in New York City. He's still a great friend. This is one of the first drawings, still life drawings I ever did, was my senior year in high school. This is black on paper. I'd never really, you might not believe it, I'd never really, this was like one of my first still life drawings. So I became passionate about sketching too. And this is sort of when I decided that I really wanted to do architecture, when I saw how good I was with my sketching skills. So now I'm going to show you my thesis project. I'm not really going to talk too much about my school. I went to the Savannah College of Art Design. I was there for 4 years for my undergrad, and then I got my master's in architecture. I went through, it's a 5-year program. The Now Museum is kind of a response to, I was interning in New York City between my undergrad year and my graduate year, and I was working for this insane interior designer. He was nuts, and he designed nightclubs. So I think I was just very overwhelmed at my job. I was living in the city, and so I think I felt very overwhelmed at the time. So when I was in the city, I was always looking for some sort of reprieve or a place within Manhattan that I could go to and feel comfortable. So after I came back and I was pondering what I should do for my thesis, I wanted to create some sort of experience where people can sort of feel removed in the city. This is just an image that I found that I love, because part of my thesis is focusing on, there's too many layers of concept for me to sort of divulge, but part of my concept is connecting it's a subterranean experience, and so you're connecting to the infrastructure and I'm revealing sort of what's below Columbus Circle. The reason I chose Columbus Circle is I wanted to find a site in New York City that was a place that was super stimulated, that had vehicular traffic, that had pedestrian traffic, and below, actually directly below the monument is like a nexus of trains. It's a 59th Street station. So I wanted to find a site that was on the cusp of something that was natural, because I wanted to juxtapose the environments of the city life and something that's more sort of serene and picturesque. This is just a conceptual diagram showing what I was thinking initially about the architecture of my museum and the experience I was going to create. From left to right, you have what would be an entry plaza, and my whole idea behind, well, for choosing Columbus Circle is I wanted to excavate the site and to expose the infrastructure below. So you're creating this void in the ground and a plaza that you spiral into. So this whole area is this, you have this feeling of overstimulation. So you're circling down into this plaza. You have trains that are flying through this void. And this part of the museum is focused on more like technology, social media, and it's a progression from that to something that's more natural and serene, because the ending sequences into Central Park. The intermediate area below ground, I wanted to sort of remove, instead of going from an overstimulated environment to restoration, I wanted to have a moment where you feel removed, something more ethereal. So this idea is that you're supposed to feel between two worlds. You can sort of relate it to like purgatory or something like that. But this is the area of contemplation and reflection, and then you have the ending of the museum, which would be the restorative aspect. How do you make a museum successful, and how do you keep it in the now? I do that through technology, a flexible program, connecting to the infrastructure, interactivity between the museum and the user. It's like a reciprocal relationship. Content in the museum that always changes, constant education, water, natural light, and views. This is just this is like a recap of what I was just showing you, but in more detail. This is an aerial shot of Columbus Circle, and you can kind of see I'm starting to diagram and party what's happening in that plaza. And this is the ending sequence. I'm thinking that the building, that it's coming out of the ground, and it looks like a piece of the infrastructure is coming out of the ground, essentially. Also, the part of the building that is coming out of the ground, the back of it becomes public space, so that there's some sort of lawn or green area, terrace area that you can look back into Columbus Circle. And this is showing that experience of the lawn. This is one of my initial vision sketches of that entry sequence. Just sketched it. This is like an inverted photo, and this is the sort of ending moment. This is another diagram. Columbus Circle would be on your left side, and so I was thinking about how I was going to deal with the conditions of the site and things that existed and what I wanted to add. This would be a program and adjacence diagram. So this is sort of the allotted space, the square footage where I'm trying to place it, and then to the right is the experience, because the whole idea behind well, one of my main focuses in the museum was the experiential aspect of it, and how the spaces felt, how light entered the spaces, the different materiality, the way the spaces made people feel. This is my site plan, just an aerial shot of the museum. Below where Columbus Circle is, that would be the entry, and then as you see the longer portion of the building, that's the lawn and the sort of ending sequence, as I call it. It's just an elevation of the south facade. It's supposed to look like a piece of the infrastructure coming out of the ground. West facade. This is an experiential section, so you can see it's a gradient from darkness to lightness. So the portion to the right is supposed to be more rustic, more brutal, the architecture, and it becomes more and more refined as you're ascending through the galleries and you're ending in the park. This is this is a rendering of what it would feel like to, aside from it being red, what it would feel like to be in that space. And have this technology surrounding you and having the train sort of flying through. I told my professor that I wanted the pipes and like the sewer lines to all be pouring into this space, and he thought I was crazy. But I wanted to find a beautiful way of doing it. This would be the main corridor that leads you from the entry into the gallery spaces. And like I said earlier, there's too many layers of concept within this for me to really get into. But this portion of the museum, the form and the feeling of it was derived from the idea of purgatory and pain, punishment, and purification. So as you're going through the corridor and you're ascending, you have these sort of rustic obstructions that force you into these galleries, creating this super heightened experience. This would be, once you're inside one of the galleries, there would be the content that would be in these galleries is, it would mostly be installation art. I call this like an ethereal threshold. It's when you're moving from one realm to another. So you go into this room and you can see above you, and you have water surrounding you. You can see the street above, and you have these reflecting surfaces that are bouncing back and forth, and you can see yourselves in them. So you're supposed to feel somewhat removed. This isn't supposed to be it's supposed to be a surreal experience. And this is the ending sequences once you're in the park. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about my current position at Yabu Pushelberg. We specialize in mostly like hotel design, high-end hotels, and hospitality projects. We do Andaz hotels, we do Ritz-Carlton, and a few others. So this is a shot of my boss's unbelievable apartment on the West Side Highway, which is kind of disgusting to look at. It's so unbelievable. And that's in Anish Kapoor. I don't know if you guys know who Anish Kapoor is, but that's an amazing sculptor. This shot's unbelievable. When you walk into his apartment, this wood paneling on either side, all bedrooms are concealed. So when you walk into the apartment, you think, where are all the bedrooms? You sort of push the doors in and they slide. It's crazy. This is a residential project that we have in New York, OMP. Typically the process, the way that we work with our clients is when they come to us, they kind of tell us what their demographic is. And the way we work with them is we create these personas, or people that would actually live and work in the area and inhabit these apartments. So we pull images of things that they like, fashions that they like, things that they read, technologies that they use, and we start building this whole story of typically a couple and what they would do in this space and just how they would live their lifestyle. This is a floor plan. This is one of the amenities levels. It's also a cell center. One of the concepts for this building was that the apartments were smaller, so we wanted to make the public spaces seem like they were an extension of their home. So you have a game room, screening rooms, great rooms. So it really, truly does feel like an extension of your home. So you can see you have the top, the gaming room, screening room, and great room. This is just a few images showing FF&E selections, architecturally what we're thinking. This is more of just a gestalt, just painting a picture for the client of what the space could be like. So we're just pulling images together, showing them what we're going to generate for them. This is a hand rendering done of the great room, looking from the great room, or looking from the dining room into the great room. Mostly we use some sort of 3D, we use some 3D modeling softwares like SketchUp, things that are super basic, and then we typically sketch over this. But this type of rendering probably takes a full day, 2 days. But I've been there for 7 months now. When I started out, I was horrible, and now I've gotten really good at it. So this is another rendering looking into the great room. This would be your theater with a couple of details showing the wood paneling on the side and the integrated lighting. Again, sort of a mood board of what we want the spa or the pool area to feel like, and our FF&E choices and materiality. And this is the plan for that level. You have a fitness club, a pool, and a steam room. And you have a men's and women's locker room. There's also a kids club. This is just a perspective of the pool itself, and you're looking into Madison Square Park, which is unbelievable. Gorgeous. The walls are some type of marble, I'm not sure. And this would be our sauna / steam. It's like integrating both into one area, and we have this huge oversized shower. And this is our kids club. So another hamburger. I'm also going to present to you Yabu Pushelberg Smith Hotel. This one's already been built. This is in Tribeca. I think it's 85 West Broadway. This is the floor plan. So I have a pointer. Where is it? I'm sorry.
Center.
Okay, cool. So basically, this is where you'd enter. This is like an elevator vestibule. You have your reception here. This would be a sitting area or a lounge, and then you have a cocktail lounge here. And on either side, these are like our FF&E choices. It's again showing exactly the furniture pieces that we intend on using in the project, so the client knows exactly the look that we're going for. So obviously, this is more of a masculine space. This is more like a smoking lounge, that type of thing, just because of the dark leathers, the rough textures, and it is refined, but at the same time, it has a sort of rustic edge to it. This would be a rendering of one of the bathrooms in the entry. You can see another hand rendering that's just showing an image of the lighting we intend on using and finishes. This is sort of an elevation study, and this is all the entry and the lobby and reception area. The reason we do elevation studies is so that we can see compositionally how things work, what finishes we're going to use, proportions, that sort of thing. Because you can model something in 3D and it looks amazing, but then when you put it in elevation, it doesn't really make sense. And this is, we typically design all of our elevator vestibules too. And it depends on what project you're on. So sometimes our scope is just public areas and we won't necessarily do rooms, but in most hotel projects, we do all public spaces and we do all guest rooms. This is another all mood images, FF&E artwork for the men's lounge, or the lounge, not the men's lounge. And this is a hand rendering of that lounge. Future Ventures. I wish my friend was here to talk with you guys too. She's unbelievable. This is my best friend from home in Alabama. Her name's Elizabeth Hunt. She's been my best friend since we were babies. We were like holding hands in our crib. She's one of the most talented people I've met, and she and I are very, very similar. We're like brother and sister, but she is a senior account manager at Swell. It's a creative agency in the city. She has an unbelievable eye for detail. She has a great level of taste, and she's just extremely smart and has a great artistic background. And she personally manages accounts for Shopbop, Smashbox, Harry Winston, NARS, Maybelline, Amazon, and etc. We're not exactly sure what we're going to do. I have a love for men's fashion. She has a love for fashion. She has a love for interior, so do I. So in the next 4 to 5 years, we're going to try and figure something out. Our dads are business partners and have been for the past 20 years, so it just makes sense for us to do something together. We're not really sure what we're going to do, but yep. And this is just a quote from my portfolio. Up next is Annabelle Armstrong. Annabelle Armstrong's passion for precision and obsession over detail has generated excitement and buzz around her line, The Mudroom Closet. In the spring of 2012, she received the Serlin Award presented by the Savannah College of Art and Design for Most Outstanding Women's Wear Collection.
Thank you, Noah. first time I need technical help. Thanks to Nicholas for getting me involved with this. Thanks for all of his help in the past. He helped me quite a bit with my senior collection in technical ways, which became a big part of it. And thank you all for coming. I'm going to talk a lot about sort of the growth and building of a concept, whether it be in fashion or in interior design, any form of design, and the necessity for that growth in order to come up with original design. And I'm going to tell you that through my senior collection. So my initial concept was this cluster of barnacles, which I found, took some pictures of it. I love them. I started doing a lot of research on barnacles and was fascinated by their structure, the way they live. Some of them are very invasive, some just live peacefully between the cracks, but we've generally tried to avoid them. So these are some initial sketches from the collection. Actually created a barnacle with fabric to embellish the fabric, to embellish the clothes. Sort of trying to exemplify the barnacle lifestyle. I started working with leather to create the barnacles, and it was clear that my concept had to change a bit. So I took on a much more modern form of barnacle, these small leather pieces, which I eventually started to get laser cut out. And when I did that, my whole concept changed. It went away from the ocean, it went away from the really strict structure of the barnacles into the mudroom closet, which was my concept, all about sort of outdoor living, that sort of style, that closet in your house that has clothes in it, that has had those clothes in it for a while. Maybe they've been passed down, but for some reason they are timeless, and they always stay there and anyone can throw on. Much more fascinating than the trends that come and go all the time and are copied constantly. So here we are. I'm always taking inspiration from nature. This is obviously amazing. So here are my barnacle pieces sewn onto a very light jersey. And this whole process was really changing all the time. Better ideas came, and I usually ran with those better ideas, which is really necessary, I believe, in the process. It turned into outerwear. It turned into sort of sporty but very classic outerwear with raincoat material and all sorts. So this was more initial sketches. Still doesn't look anything like this in the end. And some more of my process at SCAD, Savannah College of Art and Design. We went through and did all the design at first. I tended to jump around a bit, but design at first, and then the construction of the mock-ups, or muslins as they're called, and then final garments. Mine changed through every stage, which isn't great, but it worked out well. So here's where it really started to come together. I started using the negative of the leather cutouts as my novelty fabric, which is sort of the fabric that stands out in a collection, and you add other things into it that go with it. So I'm using wools, some very traditional shirting, and as well as hand knitting. Here's some more sketches, just some little details. Yeah, so I would always tend to turn back to functionality when it comes to design, and let myself be inspired by that. Coming out with small details, you can see sort of the cuff details and how I was using the leather. Getting the leather laser cut was the most amazing thing. I mean, Ben went into some really technical points of the technology that it was at SCAD, but I was amazed with just the laser cutter. So I started getting everything laser cut. I'm going to give you the story of one garment from beginning to end. I think it would make everything clear. These shorts, not so happy model, but these shorts I did initial design, initial construction, and then moved into scanning in my patterns into the computer and doing all of the layout, all of the lines, everything that was going to be cut. Nicholas helped me a lot, converting to Rhino. I don't know. Anyways, students will see it. Nicholas helped me with the technical process of bringing it to the laser cutter, which I was able to do at SCAD. The opportunity at SCAD for using the technology was really amazing. I would not have been able to create this collection, or it would have been extremely expensive to create it outside of SCAD. So, of course, I took that opportunity. And this is a video of the laser cutting, which I will have set up over there afterwards, as well as most of the garments from the collection that you're welcome to look at, touch, take pictures, whatever you want. And here's how they turned out, the shorts specifically. Everyone questions with my knitting, the knitting needle still being in it, but I think creating anything, it takes a certain eye to see when something's actually finished, and I really loved it. Like, I loved it finished. I could have finished it. I loved it, the unfinished look, and it was really the only sort of conceptual piece in the collection. But and everyone else loved it, so I went with it. And there's my shorts. This is the jacket, the main large leather piece of the collection. It was the first one I created. It was really fun. So I just got all the pieces cut out and then sewed all together. And here's the jacket. Initially I didn't plan on adding so many details, but when I was in the computer and actually designing it, there was so much opportunity to go even deeper, such as details like this, the elbow patch. It's not a patch, but so we had a lot of fun with that. This is I love this outfit specifically because I put in a map of Savannah in the back of it. Just a little symbol. Savannah is very special to me. So here it is. Everyone always goes up to it and points out where they live, right? I knew how to knit as a child, and my mother actually taught me to sew as a child when I was 5, which really got me into it, got me going, and was always fascinated by construction. But this was the first time I'd really knit anything. And I learned 2 stitches on YouTube. And yeah, I just had a lot of fun with it. It was great. And then decided it was finished. All right, design process in SCAD. I told you did design, mock-ups, and then the construction. And periodically through mock-ups and the final construction, we had critiques every 2 weeks. And we needed 2 outfits completed every 2 weeks. So an outfit a week. It's a lot. And so we were offered advice by the chair, the dean, all of the professors, and often some industry people that SCAD would bring in, mostly from New York, which was a real honor. I had a mentorship at SCAD. Every year for the seniors, they bring in 2 designer mentors. This is William Calvert. He is a designer in New York City, and 6 students are chosen for each designer to be mentored once a month. They're flown in to offer advice, you know, helping hand, just whatever they need. So that was really nice. I had sort of privately staged meetings with him, and it was very helpful. He helped me a lot. So here's the whole collection, a capsule collection, 6 looks. We had the clothes then went into the jury show, which 40 or 50 industry people came down. SCAD brought in to judge and vote on the collections, all of the senior collections, and then 20 out of 100 were chosen for the fashion show, which is at the end of the year. And so these are my jury show pictures. This was styled by me, whereas in the fashion show, they bring out an outside stylist to help blend all of the students' collections together, which is, as you can imagine, probably is very controversial at times. But so here is the SCAD fashion show. It's always a big event in Savannah. And here are 2 looks from the show. So she changed a few things, put those shoes with it. Took the sleeves off my jacket, a few different things, but I mean, the clothes still looked good. I was happy with it. They weren't the initial models that were meant for the clothes, so there were some fit issues. But, okay, receiving and education design, it's everything you make of it. You can go through it easily, or you can really, really take advantage of it. If anyone here is interested in that, I'd highly suggest looking at art school and seriously looking into all of the majors that are offered. People don't realize it's not just art, and people don't realize the depth of design and the fact that design is all around us everywhere. It just decides everything we do. And there are, how many majors? Let's go. 50 majors based on art and design. Like I said, learned to sew so young. I've been making clothes for so long that fashion design was definitely the choice for me, but I was constantly fascinated by the people around me, other industries, other departments, including industrial design was always fascinating to me, especially because I was close to it. And yeah, so there's so much opportunity in that, and everyone should look into it, look at all of the different options. So yeah, look at my clothes when it's done. Ben's got stuff out, awesome pulls, and we've got Nicholas up next. Nicholas, Joan gave a very nice introduction of Nicholas, but he and I have been close for a while. He's working in New York City now and doing very well, and has won multiple awards for his outstanding work.
Not sticking to the script, Annabelle.
Joan said the script.
So, thank you, Annabelle. Thank you, Ben, Chandler, for coming out. Amazing, amazing stuff. Incredible, incredible collection. Chandler's amazing renderings. Ben's amazing hair. I guess I'm going to take you through my entire life quickly. And we'll get to one project, and I'll kind of show you how we learn how to research in industrial design. Hit it, Joan. So about 27 years ago, while traveling the Greek islands, my American father met my Norwegian mother. 3 years later, they started a family in New York City. And then 4 years after that, pregnant with my brother, my parents decided to relocate to Weston. here in Connecticut. When we were young, we were very fortunate to have family and friends living around the world. So our parents would take us on these amazing trips, everywhere from Egypt to Greece to Sweden, Norway. And we were very lucky to be brought up in a bilingual family. And during these trips, I would take with me a pen, some messy pastels, magic markers in my backpack, and I would sit and I would draw my surroundings, my environment. I was really interested initially in sunsets, not as good as Chandler's Conte drawing, but still, it was something that kind of resonated with me. And then as I grew older, my eye for detail matured, as well as kind of really focusing on kind of the minute aspects of each drawing. I would spend hours on each rivet on a metal door, or a scale on a dragon. So when I moved to high school, or when I went to high school in Weston, I began expressing my interest through different mediums such as skateboarding and snowboarding. But even along those lines, I was still interested in design. I would travel to Mount Hood during the summers. I was both a camper and a counselor at Wendell Snowboard Camp. I took an interest in kind of the stickers, the logos, and the artwork used on the snowboards. And snowboarding itself became its own world, with its own celebrities and egos, and it was really unknown to the outside, and this kind of excited me. So when college rolled around, I really didn't know what I wanted to pursue as a career, per se. I knew what I liked, and what I liked I applied to. So applying to colleges, I was lucky to get into some really great ones, as you can see on the board, and I took a trip around the US, and I visited each one. But I have to say, my motivations were good, but I may have had some biases. I knew there was some really great snowboarding up in UVM, as well as Colorado and Portland. And my father, of course, received his undergraduate degree in Wisconsin, so I had to apply there. There was rumored to be some really terrific academic offerings at the University of Arizona. And so SCAD was really like the only place that I'd never considered going to. So once I took a trip there, I was really inspired by their facilities, by the people that were there. They had advanced rendering. They took a large emphasis on their technology. They both had analog and digital model making, and they had just established their 3D printing lab, which was brand new technology no one knew about. So SCAD was on the cutting edge of that. And so once I was there, I was surrounded by a lot of interesting people. These are some images of some friends. They all shared a common passion of the arts, but they had different focuses. The collaboration at SCAD was fantastic. Everybody would work with each other on different projects. Like Annabelle was saying, I would help her with her laser cutting, and then I would ask her about my project. We would give each other feedback. And everybody was from different places. It seemed like this was art school in general was not necessarily the stereotypical art school that your guidance counselor warns you about. It was a place where people went who knew what they wanted to do. It wasn't a place to go find yourself, in that sense. So while I was there collaborating with all these great people, I was really happy with the projects and the work I turned out. Everything from lighting design, product design, furniture design. But the project I'm most proud about is actually the Sense Space, which I designed for Easter Seals Disability Services. Excuse me. So Easter Seals challenged designers to develop a sensory aid to assist children with sensory processing disorder in their ability to process their sensory environment. And this was very important to me because I had just been I'd been given the news that one of my young family members had been diagnosed with sensory processing disorder. So this challenge intrigued me, and I took it up. And all my design projects, they really start with an initial research phase. This involves me scouring the internet, harvesting as much information as possible, going to the library, and educating myself about the topic to the best of my abilities. One of the biggest facts that kept on arising was 16% of children were diagnosed with sensory disorders. But this is just a diagnosis. There's many, many more children that show symptoms of sensory processing disorder. Carol Krenowitz, an expert in the field, says that senses are developed in the utero prior to birth, and children with SPD need a daily diet of sensory stimulation immediately after the diagnosis. So when distinguishing the four most common sensory disorders, I really needed to understand them and understand my user. The first one was visual input dysfunction, which is normally children would have difficulty tracking moving objects. Vestibular dysfunction, children with sensitivity to gravitational changes, they may have trouble finding their balance. Tactile dysfunction, children who have either overly or understimulated nerves within their hands, very sensitive or undersensitive to pressure, temperature, and pain. Proprioceptive dysfunction, which is the underdevelopment of input from the joints and muscles. Children who are very sensitive to body position, weight, and pressure. So when thinking about this and incorporating these four most common diagnoses of SPD, I really wanted to think about it holistically, and I wanted my product to apply to the largest group of users. And by applying a universal design, I have a kind of a definition here. I wanted it to be used by all children with SPD, no matter what the specific need, to the greatest possible extent. So for an example, universal design, if we take tactile dysfunction, on one side of the spectrum you would have hyposensitivity, and then on the other side you would have hypersensitivity. And you have kind of a bell curve when you think about the average child, and they would end up right around here. So my design focus was on either end of the spectrum. So during my second phase, the immersive research phase, I visited the Savannah Association for the Blind, which was conveniently located next door to me. They had great employees, Tammy, Stephanie, and Terry, who helped me, and they were very, very open and willing to be a part of my research. They all had 35 years of experience between the three of them, and they introduced me to David. David was one of their students. David suffered from multiple sensory processing disorders, and he became my subject of research. I've also, during that time, visited the Georgia Academy for the Blind with a research partner, where we took a tour and spoke with the occupational therapists there. Their teaching methods were very simple and basic. They would apply textures to picture books. They would create a sensory calendar. A spoon signifying lunch, pillow signifying nap time, or a ball or a brush signifying art class. So, taking all this knowledge and synthesizing it into key insights, we decided to develop a prototype. We approached the Savannah Association for the Blind with blank sheets and allowed them to sketch for us what they thought would be best for their students. They gave us a checklist. They wanted it to be portable. They had to normally travel to their students. Their students couldn't come to them. They needed a canopy to hang toys from. They wanted an enclosed environment for the children not to be distracted by exterior sounds, as well as soft walls, and most importantly, they wanted it to be cheap. Many of the aids that they were using at the time were extremely expensive, and which the organization could not afford. So we got into the car, went over to Home Depot, picked up a few supplies. After a few days and some sweat, we arrived back with this. It may not look like much. It was basically a box frame. You can see my design partner opening it up here, and basically it was very simple. An acrylic roof, felt walls, and just a normal wooden frame with a handle on the end of it. And this fulfilled every single aspect of their checklist. It was, there was a canopy in which we drilled holes in the acrylic in which they could hang toys, there were soft walls, and there was this enclosed environment for the child to really focus on his his internal environment, not external noises. And it also cost $21.93, which was a big plus for them. They're still using that prototype. Fourth phase is the design phase, more of a conceptual phase. Especially in school, you do a lot of projects that are conceptual. They're not necessarily going to market, but the ideas can be applied in the field. So I started with the normal sketchbook, going to the coffee shop, taking my sketches from my sketchbook and applying them to my iPad. I would sketch directly onto my iPad and then taking those sketches, emailing them to my account, and then pulling them up on the Wacom screen that you saw Ben show earlier. And so the initial concepts were fairly simple, kind of similar to what we had created in the prototype, available for kind of one child to lay in. There was a collapsible concept, there's an open air concept, there was a sound tent here in which there would be 360 speakers around the child, and also we played with lights, having translucent openings at the top of the form. But I was really stuck. I didn't know where I wanted to head with this, and as Annabelle said before, everything kind of evolves. All design evolves to your own idea. And my idea came one night when I went over to my friend's apartment, and he had this outside his door. And I was wondering, I'd never seen one of these before. It's a black Riverstone mat. And there was something about the Riverstone that I saw which kind of resonated with me. They were kind of organic, they were soft, they were inviting, they had some type of structure, and they seemed very durable. So I took this form and I applied it to my final concept, which was the sense space that I did. It's 100 inches long, you can see there in the sketch, and then in the basic rendering here of the child within the sense space. So this is a top view of the sense space. The material that it's made from is called cross lights. It's a closed cell resin. It can be used outdoors. It's non-toxic. You can clean it with soap and water, and it prohibits bacterial growth. There's 3 areas within the sense space. Area 1 has high ceilings for a child in a baby seat. Area 2, lowered ceilings with tactile pads that are connected to the roof. And Area 3 that is the smallest, that is catered to the play age, 3 to 5 years old, where children can actually walk up onto the space. This is the bottom view of the sense space. The sound and textural exploration can be achieved through 30 customizable textural pads, which can be placed anywhere within the space. This is a concept, so the idea that the pads could, if you had a child that was hyposensitive to the point where they craved coarse textures, you could outfit the interior of the cave with coarse textures, eventually introducing softer textures, allowing the increased sensory vocabulary of the child, as well as visual stimulation. The perforations within this space allow lights to shine through, giving a sense of depth. And so within the user scenario, you have the child lying down on his back playing with these hanging toys. There's auditory exploration. The sounds he's creating is staying within the space. There's a large opening for parental engagement. Parents can crawl in and play with the child. And the curved form reflects sound from external sound pollution. So once I finished this prototype, I submitted it to Easter and they awarded me with first place in their design sense competition, and they took my poster there on tour around to different galas, and the jurors were extremely excited about my concept, and we have been in touch ever since. For more information on the sense space, you can just go to vimeo.com and search the sense space, and there's a video about that. Or you can go to my website, swerdlowecity.com. Check it out. Thank you very much. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to take a quick break, 5 minutes, and then we'll do a Q&A. Thank you. Yeah, just shut it off. Joan, can you lock the doors? Make sure nobody leaves.
We have to sit up front because it's question and answer.
We can just sit here on the end. I'll start off the Q&A. Is there anybody here thinking about going to design school? Yeah? Oh, you're in this? Very good. And you? I don't want to point you out. Nobody can see you. Everybody's facing this way. Freshman in high school? You have some time. Anybody back there going to design school? No? You guys look very fashionable. Fashion marketing, maybe? No?
I don't know, we're all freshmen. We'll see.
Freshman in high school?
Yeah.
Okay, you have some time.
I'd like to ask Annabelle a question.
Hold slow your roll, slow your roll. We're going to start with a curated Q&A.
Oh.
I'm gonna begin the Q&A. We're gonna pass out these. Chandler, can you pass out these microphones? And then from there we'll go and we'll ask the audience. I just put these questions together today, earlier this morning, so these guys have no clue what they're about, what they're in for. I'll start with Ben. Ben, what is your favorite parts of the design process?
I guess that would have to be the collaboration between industrial designer and engineer, where we draw something, we take our sketch and we give it to the engineer to create on the computer as a three-dimensional CAD file, and they say, what the hell, you can't make this, that can't be produced. And all of a sudden we have to compromise, and there's a give and take relationship where they're trying to make it engineered and easy to manufacture, and we're trying to make it innovative and new. And so it's that balance of rationalism with creativity.
How rational are the engineers?
Very rational.
How far do you have to push the engineers at work to get what you want?
Actually, at Product Ventures, they're pretty good, very good at working with industrial designers. They're one of the designers on our team, one of the engineers on our team is actually an industrial designer. He was trained as an industrial designer, and so aesthetically they have good taste, and they know that it's a design-driven company. So they do a really great job of keeping the design intent and getting something that is manufacturing worthy.
Just a fair warning to anybody out there that is thinking about producing a product. If you have a designer creating the product for you and then sending it off to a manufacturer in China, do not expect that product to come back looking the same. Is there anything else you want to comment on that fact?
Yeah.
Chandler.
What? Yeah, occasionally you do send something. Some clients like to work with you and have a lot of give and take, and they show you what their manufacturer can do, and give you an opportunity to say, no, wait, we need to really rethink that, and because we're going to lose the design intent. And others, you'll give them a drawing, and they'll take it and they'll send it to China, and all of a sudden something's on shelves that doesn't really, it sort of looks like what you designed, but it isn't really, and so that can be frustrating. So there is an important balance that needs to be found between design and engineering.
Great. This question is for Annabelle. Annabelle, I know you love women's fashion, but would you ever consider creating a men's ready-to-wear line?
Do I have to use this?
Yes. No, but we're streaming. We're streaming live to about 4 people.
But you're also on local television, which
And we're on local television,
needs
so that's 10 altogether.
Here's the microphone. Obviously, my clothes have a feminine appeal, but with some elements of androgynous aspects in there. I think men and women's fashion is only becoming closer. Women are dressing more confidently and dressing more like men, and men are becoming very fashionable. Just in the past, I know, look at them. Men are becoming much more fashionable. Men's fashion is getting huge. Men are confident to be dressing. Look at my dad. Confident to be dressing in a style rather than what's just traditional. So I would definitely consider doing men's line. I'd have to learn a lot about the technical differences, but that's the fun part.
At SCAD, could you choose between men's and women's? Could you do both? Or was it one or the other?
Yes, you could do a men's line, but initially in the first 3 years, it was almost entirely a concentration on women's fashion. And then in the, but in the end, when people were pulling together their senior collections, there were usually about like 10 menswear collections, and those students had to go through a lot more of a process, learning pattern making for menswear rather than womenswear, which is very different.
So, who do you? We saw the mentor that you had in your presentation. Who do you seek for approval within your design process?
I think that was the best thing about going to design school, was that you were constantly surrounded by other artists, other designers, just students that are, just as fascinated with design as you are. And, I'd look to them, and that's something I really miss about being at school. I'd be in a room with all of us just going mad at exams, or, last minute design decisions, or that was great. That was probably the best thing.
Thank you, Annabelle. This next question is for Chandler. Chandler, why did you stop modeling? You're so damn handsome. Okay, so what are the sources of your inspiration as a designer, Chandler?
I think, especially in school, as Annabelle was saying, just being around other students who are super passionate about design and their respective fields or whatever, that's obviously inspiring. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm inspired by a lot of things, like my walk to work, food that I try, people that I meet. Travel obviously is a huge contributor to my inspiration. And recently I've started to, at work a lot, when we're pulling images for certain projects, I see like men's fashion, or I'll see paintings or sculptures or artist work that really inspires me. Not necessarily just architects, but people that are just super talented. So, and also the passion of other people around me and people that I work with, to me, is extremely inspiring, because I'm so passionate about what I do. So it's awesome to see that fire in someone else. When I see that, I gravitate towards it, and I don't know. So that's probably other passion from other people is what inspires me.
You're multi-talented. Would you ever consider another career outside of architecture?
I would, just because when you go to architecture school, it's multifaceted. You're working in a bunch of different mediums, and you're honing so many different skill sets. So I feel like when you go to architecture school, you come out and you're a sculptor, you're amazing at, you're great at hand drafting, rendering, pulling finishes, compositionally knowing how things work. And I don't know, I think that architecture is a good foundation for sort of any design-related career, and I could take it into, I see myself, if I don't do architecture and interiors, I could see myself transcending into like menswear, men's fashion. So I think architecture and fashion parallel each other. Tom Ford went to school at Parsons for architecture. So I don't think necessarily because you go to school and you come out with a certain degree that you can't go out and use your skill set in a different profession, because I think it's universal. And if you're super talented and you're passionate and you have a good eye and you're talented, it'll take you wherever you want it to. So,
are people born with these talents?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, I think you're born with them. It's nothing you can acquire. I mean, I don't think you can teach yourself to have good taste, or I don't think you can teach yourself composition. Most people who are super successful in the design field were sort of born with this innate passion for design and a keen eye for it. So, but I do think some things can be learned, but the skill set, yeah, but
controversial.
Sure.
I like that. All right, so we're going to open up the. Does anybody have questions? I can keep on going.
I have a question, Chandler. You referenced many levels of concept in your Columbus Circle Museum.
Yep.
What is it that ties the museum itself to the statue of Columbus? Is it in discovery or something else?
Yeah, well, initially when I was talking about, I wanted to find, I guess, discovery and sort of pilgrimage has something to do with it. Because when I was talking about finding a reprieve, there is a sense of discovery that it's not very obvious. That when you come upon the circle, there is a sense of discovery. You see down into this space, and you're curious, and you want to go down and be a part of whatever's going on down there, and just sort of explore. Because I have that feeling a lot with the infrastructure in New York. I'm always, even when I'm sleeping and I can feel a train under me, I'm thinking like, what's going on down there? It's insane. And I think right now they're digging at, one thing that sparks my curiosity the most is that they're digging, I think it's something for New Jersey Transit, but it's like 200 feet below. I don't know, I just am fascinated with like the mechanics behind how they do this crazy, all this crazy stuff below ground. But yeah, there's obviously like a sense of discovery, I think, with my museum. That was one of the, I guess I focused on that a good bit, so. I don't know if I answered your question.
Thanks.
Yeah, one more. Mr. Alan Swerdlowe.
Well, first of all, in terms of your digging, there's actually 3 major tunnels being built in New York right now. Subways and one for water tunnel. The infrastructural aspects are really intriguing. We should look at that. But I have a question for Ben. I recently bought a bottle of vodka. And the reason I bought this bottle was because of the bottle. And I suspect you had a hand in designing the bottle. And that is the Kettle One Orange bottle, which I thought was amazing. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Yep, I did not design Kettle One.
But what's amazing about this bottle is that it uses reflective material on the back of the label, which is genius, to reflect color back into a clear vodka to make it a clear orange, rather than coloring the bottle or the vodka itself. I've never seen that. I thought it was interesting. I thought if you had a hand in it, you could explain the design process behind that, but maybe you know something about it. Well, the vodka isn't very good, by the way, so that's besides the point.
Yeah, I was using that as an example of how we would approach that project. We did not work on that specific project, but that's a huge part of that initial deep dive research. When we get an assignment like to design a vodka bottle, we go out and we buy not only every vodka bottle out there, but we look at other bottles and other materials. So we might see that a beer bottle is using that, and there are even vodka bottles now with OLED flashing labels. So we do like to observe all of that technology and see what's relevant for the brand we're designing for.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Use the microphone, please.
Sure. I thought the presentations were terrific, and I'm curious about what the transition was like when you graduated from design school into your first job. Technically, you know, the things you were taught at school and how you transitioned into real work, so to speak.
I think we can all answer that question. You want to start with Annabelle?
Well, I should start by saying what I'm doing now. I didn't necessarily share it because I was mostly sharing my senior collection. I'm not working in design right now, but have taken the construction side. That's really what I mean, I love design, but the construction is what really keeps me going. So right now I'm actually working for Levi's, which is an honor. It's a great company. They have a made-to-order bespoke jeans option. Yeah, so I'm one of the tailors. So in the meatpacking district in New York City, down below, they're sewing the jeans, which is pretty cool. So yeah, I'm happy to be doing that right now. My transition from school, I took advantage of nice weather in the summer for a little while, and then I actually interned with Diane von Furstenberg for 3 months, and I was a little bit turned off by the corporate design world. I talked a lot about how concept has to change and the importance of that. And that's something that really can't happen with a massive design team. There just isn't enough time for ideas to mature, and the creativity just really gets knocked down. And I really didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't want to be an assistant designer in that kind of company, or it was a great company. I loved working for Diane von Furstenberg. It was fantastic. I have every respect for it, but yeah, just in general, I didn't like that. So this is what's keeping me going right now at Levi's, and I love it. It's great.
Thanks. Ben?
Yeah, for me it was the transition from being in a class with a mix of talent and lack of talented students, and there were people there for different reasons. There were great designers, and there were people who were just taking it to have a major, and you go into the working world and you're there with people who want to be there, who are much higher level talent, and so it's more motivating. It's scarier when you go to critique with people who you respect, and they've been doing it for 30 years longer than you, so pinning up your sketches in front of them is frightening, but also you learn a lot more because you spend that much more on creating a better drawing because it's going to be going in front of an industrial designer that you respect, as opposed to someone who doesn't even care about the class that they're in. And then, so the critiquing is different, and then just the overall level of work output.
I'm going to touch on, she was mentioning internships. I think that's like an integral part of like transitioning obviously into the workforce, is just to kind of know what you're getting yourself into, and within different industries there are different scopes and scales. For instance, like in architecture and interiors, you have small design studios that are 3 and 4 people, and you're doing smaller projects and you have more of a hand in the design. Then you have, you know, larger firms where you're just one little gear in the huge machine. So I think it's important to have a successful transition and be happy into the workforce is to go out and have internship experience before you leave college. At least 2 internships. And it's definitely hasn't been easy, but it's been enlightening, and you are put in positions where you're presenting in front of really important people, and it's really scary and that sort of thing, but it makes this sort of thing where you can come out and tell your story a lot easier. So it's been, before I was actually here in New York at Yabu Puschelberg, I accepted a job. Well, my issue was I applied to too many places and I had offers and I didn't really know where I wanted to go, and I ended up in Dallas, Texas for 3 months. I was there working for a huge corporate architecture firm called Callison. I was there, and then one of the project that I was on sort of went sour because they lost the deal or something. So they started to furlough people, and I was super frustrated because I turned down so many other offers at these amazing places, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, you really screwed yourself over. Look where you are. You're in Texas. You're in the middle of nowhere, and you could have been in New York working at an amazing firm. And I think I just took it. I think I was pressured. The last moment I was finishing my thesis. I hadn't slept in months, and I made the wrong decision. But that's just part of it. So luckily, the offer that I declined, I called like begging and groveling to them. Will you offer me a position in the fall? And they ended up letting me come to Yabu Puschelberg in the fall, so I started in September. So it's not easy transitioning. I think you just have to try and navigate your way through it. And but I think obviously internship experience is going to be the best force to help you navigate all the mess that you'll get into. So.
Thanks, Chandler. My experience transitioning from college to a job, especially at a place like Coach in New York City, such a large and powerful company within the small leather goods market, was really actually taking my hands off the wheel. It was really tough for me not to be in control of every step of the process. I think it's true for all of us. With our thesis or with our projects, we were the owners and drivers of every portion, whether it be the research, the sketching, the ideation. There was no engineer telling us we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. There wasn't anybody saying we don't have the budget to send you to here, or we don't, you can't waste your time doing this. There's other things to do. So working where I'm working now, it was a real eye opener. Yes, it's frustrating when you initially go from 120 miles an hour down to 30, but I think when you're placed in a position where you're told to focus on only one thing, it helps you grow both as a person and a designer, because you become an expert in that one thing. So what I'm doing right now for Coach is creating a system to visualize different bags and samples to the point where you can cut down physical sample making to a digital sample making. So it's really, really interesting, and although I can't be part of every process, and there's a lot of politics, a lot of chiefs involved, it's tough to take a step back, but that was my hardest transition, I think. Any more questions? Okay. I think we can do 3 more, and we'll keep it short.
I wanted to ask about the job market. How do you see the job prospects in design in general, and are there some areas that you're more likely to find employment in, or in the near future, let's say the next 10 to 15 years, where do you see the most opportunities be?
Ben, do you want to answer this? We were talking about this earlier.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, because there are a lot of people, a lot of my friends from high school and a lot of my friends from college are still searching, whether it's a year out or a few months out. And that's not just in design or music industry, which some of my friends are in, it's across everything. And I think it really just comes down to motivation and skill level, because obviously if you're a really talented designer, there's always a position for you, and if you're a really talented musician, there's always a band you can be a part of. So it's hard to, I don't know the numbers, the rates of what jobs there are. There are definitely jobs in industrial design out there. Always, I get email notifications from when I was doing my job search, and there's a constant job stream of available jobs. So I think it's growing. It has been growing, and there are a lot of design firms, and a lot of big companies are starting to realize that design is really important in helping them stand out on a shelf and be more useful to consumers. So it's not something that's going away, and deep diving on industrial design and creating a better product can't be outsourced to a manufacturer. You need to actually be involved with the users who are going to be using it, and we need an involved design process if we want to have a better product at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'd like to springboard off that too. Just in my department, we are opening up 15 slots to hire people in the upcoming 6 months. So, I mean, jobs, I guess, are going a little bit from analog to digital now. And it's extremely important to be on top of software, new emerging technologies, because that will give you, as a person who's applying to these positions, a leading edge over the competition. Second question.
So dialing back to high school, I love the high school images, they were great. What courses or things that you did in high school were the most helpful when you got to design school? And then perhaps what didn't you do that you wish you had that would have been helpful in design school?
You want to take that? Should we all answer that? We'll keep it short.
Yeah, I think everyone will have to answer.
I think I have a unique view on this because there were a lot of parts of school that I struggled with. I was diagnosed pretty young with multiple learning disabilities, and which
Who wasn't?
I mean, I had almost entirely visual mind. I had a lot of trouble comprehending, a lot of trouble with a lot of different parts of academics. So I always thrived in the arts, and not necessarily otherwise, but I kept going with, I kept learning what I could, and but just really push the art, because I knew that's what I was going to do. I was going to have some sort of a visual career, and yeah, I just put all my concentration to that, which I think was definitely important.
Thank you. Ben?
For me, it was a class. One of the things was, well, the Silvermine Art Guild that I joined and took a sculpture class with a sculptor named David. I'm drawing a blank now. It'll come to me. But I learned from him, and I learned how to sculpt and weld, and so I was creating, and I was always into art, but I knew that I didn't want to go to art school. I wanted something, or traditional art, fine art school, because I wanted something that at the time I thought would be have a steady job market, and so I wanted something a little bit more in the direction of a career that I knew would be more stable. So design seemed like the answer for that, and so far it's going pretty well. But it was a Photoshop class that I took at Staples that got me into manipulating images digitally, and then a sculpture class, and my experience with sculpture.
Thanks. Chandler?
I would say probably like extracurricular stuff, doing projects on your own that aren't necessarily tied to academics, and also coming out to things like this, like forums, listening to speakers, going to museums, just exposing yourself to design in general, I think is really important. I didn't have that as much, like growing up in Alabama. It's very rural. But I feel like if I would have grown up here in the city, I would have taken full advantage of that before I went to college and sort of nailed down my aesthetic and my path. And I feel like I would have had an even clearer direction of what I wanted to do. So I think it's just like going out and seeing other artists or creators, makers, whatever it may be, and just sort of exposing yourself to their work and seeing what you like and you don't like. But I would say, yeah, obviously push the art and try and do something that's for yourself outside of school, that's on your own time, and it's something that's derived from you, not necessarily, not that you're being influenced by someone else within your school or curriculum. So.
Thanks, John. With me, when I moved from middle school to high school, I shunned away all art classes. I just didn't want anything to do with them. What I wanted to do was go skateboarding with my friends and then go snowboarding through the summers. But my parents were hyper creative. My father's an architect as well as a photographer. My mother started her career in New York City as a fashion designer. So they were always putting a large emphasis on traveling to museums like Dia, Beacon, Mass MoCA, going to the MoMA in New York City, which was really, really interesting. For me, even though, yes, my mind was elsewhere, I was physically there, I was physically standing in front of a Rothko, and I was taking it in, but I was thinking about hitting the slopes, you know. But at the same time, it resonated with me, and once I realized that snowboarding and skateboarding was not a profession, I moved to a different mindset. All that basically came tumbling back into my life to the point where I had forgotten it for 4 years, and it all just hit all at once. And I realized I had a much larger design and art vocabulary than everybody else in my school, just because I went on these trips with my parents and they dragged me to these museums. But that being said, there's one other point I wanted to make, which I'm blanking on. But yeah, it was a lot to do with my parents and less to do with me. So, next question. We got two more. The young man in the front and Mr. Armstrong.
What do you think is the future influence of 3D printing on your industries?
I'll answer that one. I just came back from the 3D Printing Expo and Conference. The coach sent us there to do some research on 3D printing fabric. I think going forward, 3D printing is going to become a lot more advanced. There's a lot of positives and negatives with that. Copyright infringement, uses that are outside the parameters of social, I would say, social goodness, such as 3D printing weapons and so on and so forth. I mean, that's almost something you cannot stop. But the technology that I saw at this conference was really interesting. 3D printing has now become so fine, the resolution is down to 1/8 of a millimeter. So you can actually 3D print thread if you have the right geometry. You can also 3D print with multiple textures, colors, and finishes. So you essentially can 3D print a toy, a kid's toy, as well as any other household good, as long as it's not, you cannot obviously print the electrical component, but there are many forms of 3D printing. You can 3D print plastics, metals, and it's almost unlimited. Ben, you want to springboard off me?
Yeah, as far as the future of it, a lot of people talk about it as like something that we'll get in our home soon. We'll get for a couple $100, we're going to have one in our house. And at the technology that we have now, even if it comes down in price, we're not going to want one in our homes for most of us, because there's still the knowledge of how to create the files. Even if you could download the files, the materials are like plastics and rubbers. It's not, you can't print an iPhone yet. It's not that sort of thing. It's your TV remote, the battery clip on the back broke, and maybe there's an opportunity to print something there, but I don't see where it really fits into our daily lives. But I've been thinking over the past few years about things where you get an eye doctor might get a 3D printer, and they'll 3D print custom glasses for you. So something that requires a certain fit for the person. You can go in, they can scan your head, they're 3D scanners. They'll get an exact fit, and they'll create something that's more comfortable for you. So footwear, Nike currently is producing the world's first production 3D printed shoe. It's the sole of a football cleat called, believe it or not, the Nike Vapor Laser Talon, I think, which sounds like something from an Old Spice commercial. And it's actually, the cleat, the tread pattern is 3D printed out of SLS plastic, and it's really durable, and it's not customized yet to the user, but it's something that I think in the future will fits right in with Nike ID. You know, Dr. Scholl's, you go in, you stand on the thing in CVS, and it tells you where your pressure spots are on your foot. Now that 3D prints the sole for you. And so I think there are a lot of opportunities with customizable products for people, but not necessarily for the home. And also 3D printing meat.
Aren't dentists 3D printing teeth right now?
No, well, yeah, you can 3D print teeth, but I think the most...
My dentist is 85 years old and is not 3D printing. The largest commercial 3D printing company is Invisalign, if you think about that. What do they 3D print? Invisalign, they're basically... They 3D printed Invisalign?
Yeah. Yeah. So Invisalign was at that conference, and they did a huge showing of their capabilities. It was amazing. They had 50 3D printers printing over something like 3 million pieces. So I think for our last question, we'll go to Mr. Armstrong in the front. Thank you.
You guys have all been thinking about products that you're inventing or about to come out with. And I'm just curious if you give any thought to, I mean, products need advertisement. And I'm always interested in the relationship of the product and the advertising when the development of the product stops and the advertising takes over. I just wonder if you give any thought. I often think that, okay, I've got a great advertisement, I need a product for it, and vice versa. So I just wonder if you have any comment on that relationship when one starts, when it finishes, or when one takes over. And
we do not have, at Product Ventures, we don't have, and a lot of the other design firms that I've heard of, you don't have any say, if you're industrial design consultancy, you don't have any say in the advertising of the product. But something that I like to do with something, as I'm creating, I come up with a new concept, a lot of times I'm coming up with little taglines in my head for how that will be advertised. And actually occasionally we'll pitch 10 concepts to a client, and each one of them will get a little tagline that could lead to inspiration for advertising, but we don't do any of the ads for the products that we develop. Oh, the flow of that? We're creating it for a client who then either has their internal marketing department or they use another consultancy for marketing.
Can you give an example of one of those clients? Coca-Cola?
No.
Frito-Lay. They're listed on the website, productventures.com. So yeah, this has been really great. Thank you for coming out. It's been a lot of fun. Hopefully we can do this again.